Metroid Dread is one of my favorite games of all time on the Nintendo Switch. I remember the first announcement like it was yesterday. Back at E3 2021, I was streaming and I was already hyped because Nintendo sent me a package saying break in case of extreme hype, and I was very excited about that because hey, that means that there's going to be some interesting, very cool things announced at this E3. But I was not ready for the amount of hype that Metroid, a series that I've been playing for decades now, coming back and looking as cool as it did. I was actually so hyped that I temporarily dislocated my finger trying to break this package that Nintendo sent me. I'm gonna break it! No! Oh, shit! Ow! 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 No! Look at this! Oh my god! I'm trying to break it! I'm trying to break it! Oh, Metroid 5! The silky smooth controls, incredible gameplay, and fantastic story were the best the Metroid franchise has ever looked or played. But there's always one major issue when it comes to the Metroid franchise: financial sustainability. Despite being one of the best critically acclaimed franchises, Metroid hasn't had the best track record of great sales, at least compared to some of Nintendo's other franchises like Mario, Zelda, and Animal Crossing. Now, in recent years, Fire Emblem, a franchise that was almost canceled in the early 2010s if Fire Emblem Awakening didn't sell at least 250,000 units, has surpassed Metroid in popularity with the release of Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Three Houses, which has now sold more than 4.12 million units worldwide. That's easily better than any Metroid game to date. Now, MercurySteam, the team that developed Metroid Dread alongside Nintendo, was able to get the contract to make Metroid Dread due to their stellar work on two previous games for the Nintendo 3DS, Castlevania Mirror of Fate and Metroid Samus Returns, a 3DS remake of the original Metroid 2 Return to Samus from the Game Boy. MercurySteam also developed two of the most technically impressive 7th generation games with Castlevania Lords of Shadow and Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. So they were the perfect team Nintendo could work with to bring, for the first time officially in HD, a Metroid game to a Nintendo console. But the truth is, while Nintendo absolutely wants Metroid to develop into a bigger franchise, Nintendo's plans are already in motion for the franchise to take the next step. Remember, no other Metroid game had sold in excess of 3 million units prior to Metroid Dread on a singular platform. The previous record holder was Metroid Prime, just shy of 3 million on the GameCube. But with Metroid Dread on the Switch, sales surpassed Prime on the GameCube within half a year at 2.9 million units. Back on October 8, 2021, Nintendo of America President Doug Bowser revealed that Metroid Dread sold 854,000 units in the US alone for that month in October, making it the best start ever for a Metroid game. This statement about Metroid's debut sales was always kind of odd to me, at least at first. Nintendo usually doesn't talk about debut sales numbers to the press unless it's a large amount in one of their biggest IPs like Mario, Zelda, or Pokemon, which is to not be confused with Nintendo talking about sales numbers for a variety of games in their investor meetings. That's a completely different thing, where Nintendo will discuss games that have sold over 1 million in the quarter or in the fiscal year, but it's very different announcing the sales of a game shortly after launch to the press. Those things are distinctly two separate things, and Nintendo usually only does that with the biggest games, but not in this case with Metroid. For them to announce the sales of this much smaller IP in comparison that didn't even surpass 1 million units in that opening month, that tells me they are obviously aware of the sales background of Metroid and the public's perception for the Metroid franchise. Nintendo also smartly paired Metroid Dread's launch with the white Nintendo Switch OLED. The white aesthetic of the Switch OLED matched well with Samus's white suit in Metroid Dread, almost making it a pseudo special edition console for the launch of the game. We now know, thanks to MercurySteam CEO Enrique Alvarez, that Metroid Dread has sold over 3 million units. This was in response to rumors of Metroid Dread having a chaotic development cycle. Nintendo's calculated plan to launch Metroid Dread alongside a new Switch model while announcing the sales numbers when they usually wouldn't in that situation tells me Nintendo absolutely wants Metroid to do better while making decisions in order for that to happen. And while Metroid Dread wasn't a cheap game to produce, it definitely didn't have the budget of something like Super Mario Odyssey or The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So that $3 million in sales at or around near full price of $60 absolutely raised the financial profile of the Metroid franchise, and that didn't even include the pricier special edition of Metroid Dread that did well. The truth is, Nintendo has been desperately trying to set up the Metroid franchise and is doing that right at this point. Just like they did with Fire Emblem back in the early 2010s with Fire Emblem Awakening, which hopefully will transition to the next title, Metroid Prime 4. And if you really look at Nintendo's moves here, the plan was to have a 1-2 punch of Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime building off each other's success. Unfortunately, Metroid Prime 4 got cancelled, then rebooted back in development at Retro Studios, and while that was a major setback for the franchise, I believe will end up being one of the best decisions Nintendo has made with Metroid. We all saw the problems Metroid Other M caused when it launched. The last thing Nintendo needs with the Prime series after a decade-long console hiatus is a subpar experience. Considering the quality Nintendo knew was coming with Metroid Dread, Nintendo was fully aware the Metroid franchise can't have duds like Other M and Federation Force. Rebooting development with Retro Studios and hiring the right talent to make a Metroid Prime experience that fans will support is of the most importance. The console Metroid Prime games have averaged an incredible 90+ rating on Metacritic, with Metroid Prime on the GameCube being one of the best rated games of all time. Nintendo needs to maintain a high level of quality for the Metroid releases, because sales are not easy to come by for this series. Metroid Prime Remastered's 94 average on Metacritic is a stark reminder to everyone that the legacy of the Metroid franchise is high quality. Retro Studios took one of the best games of all time and made it look even better with enhanced controls and playable anywhere. While there's nothing concrete, there are a few rumors that MercurySteam is working on a new 2D Metroid game after the massive success of Metroid Dread. And it only makes sense that they would do this considering the impact Dread had for the franchise and lifting the profile for the series. Now that brings us to Metroid Prime 4, which has been in development since 2019. Retro Studios has brought in a lot of talented staff from various different major game companies, men and women that have worked on Uncharted, Call of Duty, and more. That experience developing AAA games and the cost associated with it is immense. Metroid Dread's $3 million plus in sales, breaking franchise records, was only the beginning of Nintendo's master plan. Metroid Prime 4 will be the true test to see the extent this franchise can go. After 5+ years of development now for a franchise that has never cracked more than 4 million or so in sales is a risky proposition. But I'm betting that Nintendo feels far more confident in the sales potential of Metroid Prime 4 after Metroid Dread did so well. Remember, Prime was the best-selling game in the franchise before Dread came along, and that was on the GameCube, a platform where the Nintendo Switch has sold more than 120 million units more than. Now, on the Switch, and potentially even the next Nintendo system, we could truly see to launch the franchise into new heights in popularity. Just as long as Metroid Prime 4 is good, I believe the work that started with Samus Returns, broke new ground with Dread, will flourish with Metroid Prime 4. As talented as Retro Studios is, they haven't done much since Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. We have a few ports over to the Nintendo Switch, and that's about it. The Prime series is their baby, and while many of the series' original devs are no longer at Retro Studios, the pride of the company is still very much intact. We could absolutely see that with Metroid Prime Remastered. Metroid Dread, if anything, lit an additional fire underneath them. To see a 2D Metroid game made by an external studio pass up the original Prime in sales would be inspiring to me if I was developing the game. The Metroid franchise is not only back, but it can break past its previous limitations. Nintendo and Metroid are in their best position together since the Super Nintendo and Game Boy era. We've outright seen cancellations of Metroid games from the N64 to the Nintendo Switch with the original Bandai Namco rumored Metroid Prime 4. The health and status of the Metroid franchise is strong, but all it takes is one issue to break that security. Look at what happened with one of my other favorite sci-fi third-person shooters, Mass Effect. With millions of copies sold, an incredible trilogy of games all rating over 90 plus on Metacritic, with Mass Effect 2 being one of the best reviewed games of all time, it all came crashing down with the release of Mass Effect Andromeda, even after 5+ years of development and millions spent in game development. And now we're looking at about maybe 10 years before the next Mass Effect game is launched. It doesn't take much. Nintendo knows this. On the topic of when we could see Metroid Prime 4, I would guess it will happen before the end of the year in 2024. Retro and Nintendo have been hard at work on this one. Many feel Nintendo will cancel the Switch version and put it on the next system, but I don't believe that for many different reasons. One, Nintendo wants an install base for Metroid games to sell to. The new Switch doesn't have that. Two, the game has definitely been in development on the base Switch for years, so it makes no sense to throw all of that away. And three, you could always dual launch it with the next system if you truly want to leverage the better specs. That makes everyone happy in that case, just as long as both versions are up to snuff on their respective systems. Nintendo has done this before with The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on the GameCube and Wii, in addition to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Wii U to the Nintendo Switch to great success. Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4, the truth is Nintendo is desperately trying, doing their best to make sure that these games are not only the utmost quality, but they're launched in a position to be successful and do well. It's not just about getting a great game out. It's about getting a great game out and putting it in position to do even better than what we could see. There is so much potential in the Metroid franchise to be much bigger than what it is, just like there was tons of potential in the Fire Emblem franchise to break past just being in Japan only, get into the West, and not only get into the West, but do even better than what anybody could have previously even thought for it. Metroid is right on the cusp of that, and I truly feel with Metroid Dread doing exactly what it did, breaking past the previous best-selling and popularity-wise being on one of these systems that's Nintendo's best-selling, could have the same effect, a snowball effect on Metroid Prime 4, and the truth that we are all going to see when it comes to Metroid Prime 4 and the Metroid series going forward. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch and Metroid videos right here on screen. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.